Hey, welcome back to On the Heavenly Spheres Read Out Loud. The book's by Luis Ribeiro and Helena Avalar. Um, Helena Avalar and Luis Ribeiro. She's first. We're on chapter 9, chart dynamics, aspects in motion. Let's go. The aspects form a web of interaction between the planets in a chart. This chapter focuses on the more complex patterns of planetary dynamics, the interaction by aspect of several planets, and the combination of those aspects with their essential dignities. In practice, this type of interaction is primarily analyzed with respect to horary astrology and occasionally in mundane and natal astrology. Combined movements. When specific topics are studied in a chart, certain planets are designated as significators, which represent the action being studied. In a question about career, for example, the significators are the planets that rule the ascendant, the person, and the midheaven, the career. Any relationship or lack of one between significators describes the development of that action and conveys in more detail the plot of the story. This relationship is generally represented by an aspect. Nonetheless, the contact between the significators may be reinforced, impeded, or negated by other planets. In some cases, the planetary interactions are brought about through changes in the direction of the planet's movement, while in others they occur as a byproduct of the application and separation of aspect involving a third planet. What is most important in this type of analysis is to have some idea of the motion of the planets, i.e., relative speed and direction. Also important is to be aware that an aspect has three phases: the application, perfection, and the moment when it's exact, and the separation. These concepts are essential to understanding the information in this chapter. Let's see. Oh, everything's in a box here. Let's see. A simple practical way of visualizing the movement of the planets is to use a diagram consisting of the 30-degree ruler. This ruler is an alternate way of representing the planetary positions in the zodiac, placing all of them within a space of 30 degrees, irrespective of their sign position, which is notated next to each planet, allowing for aspect distinctions. For example, in the horoscope of King Sebastian, see page 118, the planetary positions of the ruler are as follows. And then it looks like, am I supposed to read the ruler right now? Hopefully you have the book and you can look at the ruler. Go buy the book if you don't own the book. It's a good book to own. The ruler shows the distance between planets, which aids in the calculation of aspects and in seeing planetary movement. Visually, this allows the planets that are near each other by degree to be seen. The planets that are near each other on the ruler will form aspects as long as they are in the signs that aspect each other. For example, Mercury and the moon. Mercury and the moon are about 4 degrees from each other on the ruler in opposite signs, Aquarius and Leo respectively. Thus, they form an opposition. Cool. Additionally, the ruler also shows planets that are located near each other by degree, which are in the signs that do not aspect one another. This is the case with the Sun-Venus pair, situated at 10 degrees Aquarius and 10 degrees Capricorn, respectively, and with that Mars-Saturn pair, located respectively at 15 Aquarius and 14 Pisces. On the other hand, the Sun and Mars are only about 5 degrees apart and in the same sign, thereby forming a conjunction, while Venus and Saturn, being only 3 degrees apart, form a sextile. The ruler also makes it easier to observe whether the movement of the planets are applying or separating from an aspect. For example, if we look at the ruler, we can see that the Venus-Saturn sextile is applying because Venus, the faster moving planet, is moving towards Saturn, the slower planet. What does it have, like, in this Venus-Saturn There it is. Okay. It's applying because Venus, the faster planet, is moving towards Saturn, the slower planet. Also, Mars and Mercury. Where's Mercury? Are apart by about 7 degrees in the same sign, therefore coming in junction. Mercury, the faster body, is moving towards Mercury by retrograde motion. Therefore, it is applying to the conjunction. Another useful function of the ruler is that it allows us to immediately detect any planets that are void of course. For example, the moon is in the last degrees of the sign, in this case Leo, and does not apply to any aspects before leaving this sign. In this case, the moon's orb extends past the 30 degrees of the ruler. Thus, we must return to the ruler's beginning, 0 degrees, to complete the extension of the moon's orb. Remember that when this happens, the moon always changes. In this case, the moon's orb extends as far as 8 degrees Virgo, 37. 37 minutes? 8 degrees, 37 minutes? Okay. Yeah, because it's at 26, 37. As we can see by the ruler, the orb appears to touch Jupiter. However, Jupiter is in Libra, the sign next to Virgo, and therefore does not aspect it. The 30-degree ruler was first proposed by English astrologer Derek Appleby, and actually recently, because he was born in 1937 and died in 1995. The perfection of an aspect is the most important dynamic situation in the movement of the chart. An aspect is only considered perfected when it has become exact. For example, in Figure 7, Mercury at 16 degrees Aquarius forms a sextile to Mars at 17 Aries, and another to Venus at 12 degrees Sagittarius. It also forms a square to Jupiter at 18 degrees Taurus and in opposition to Saturn at 14 degrees Leo. Every aspect is with an orb. Nevertheless, from a dynamic perspective, only 2 aspects are considered. The last one, separating aspect, and the one next to complete, the applying aspect. In this case, the separation from Saturn and the applying sextile to Mars, dynamic. In this case, the separation from Saturn and the applying sextile to Mars. Dynamically, neither the sextile to Venus, which occurred before the opposition to Saturn, nor the square to Jupiter, which becomes exact after the sextile to Mars, need be considered. Okay. Translation of light. Translation of light occurs when faster planet A separates from slower planet B and applies to planet C. In such a case, it is said that planet A transmits or translates the light from planet B to planet C. In other words, planet A connects the other two in the same way that a relay racer might transport the characteristics of planet B to planet C. In practical terms, translation of light has 2 effects. It establishes a connection that would not otherwise exist when a faster planet unites 2 that do not aspect each other. 2 planets? It establishes a connection that would not otherwise exist when the faster planet unites 2 that do not aspect each other. For example, suppose that Mars at 12 degrees Sagittarius and Jupiter at 20 degrees Taurus, so looking at the chart, Mars, okay, Jupiter, they are the significators. They do not form any aspect because they are in conjunct signs, 150 degrees apart, or in aversion. However, Venus is at 15 degrees Aquarius and is separating from a sextile to Mars and is applying to a square with Jupiter. In this case, Venus unites the 2 planets, transferring the light and its nature from Mars to Jupiter. It reinforces a union when a faster planet unites 2 slower planets that are separating. For example, suppose Mars at 10 degrees Cancer and Mercury at 15 degrees Taurus are 15 degrees Taurus are the significators. Mercury is separating from a sextile to Mars, which means the aspect is completed and is dissolving. However, the moon at 12 degrees Capricorn comes in to reinforce the connection between them because it's separating from an opposition to Mars and applying to a trine to Mercury. reactivating their connection. Let's imagine a horary astrology example in which the following question is posed. Will I get a job? The chart for the question has 18 degrees Sagittarius rising, Sag rising, and 7 degrees Libra on the midheaven. In this case, the significator for the querent, the person asking the question, is Jupiter, ruler of the ascendant, which is at 10 degrees Sagittarius. It's close to the ascendant. The significator for the job is Venus, ruler of the midheaven, which is at 15 degrees Taurus. Since the significators do not have any contact with each other by aspect, we might say at first glance the querent will not get the job. They are an inversion. Okay. Notwithstanding, the movements of the moon imply the opposite. At 12 degrees Pisces, the moon unites both planets through translation of light. It separates from a square to Jupiter and applies to a sextile with Venus. We can therefore give a positive answer to this question. The querent will obtain the job, possibly through an intermediate person, that word, the moon, and establishes a connection between the querent, Jupiter, and the job, Venus. Had this configuration come up in a birth chart, it would indicate a tendency of the native, Jupiter, toward reaching his goals, Venus, with the assistance of intermediaries, of people in between, the moon. In this case, it speaks to a tendency that would have to be judged within the larger context of the natal chart. Collection of light. Let's see, we're at 12 minutes. Oh yeah, we'll read this one. Collection occurs when two planets that do not aspect each other apply to a third slower planet. In such a case, it is said that the slower planet collects the light of the other two, bringing together their qualities and acting as a unifying agent. It can represent a situation or a person who functions as an intermediary. I got it. An intermediary who facilitates the action. The type of action is indicated by the two other planets. For example, suppose the sun at 7 degrees Libra and the moon are at 10 degrees Pisces are the significators. They are in conjunct signs and therefore do not aspect each other. However, both are applying aspects to Mars, which is at 12 degrees Gemini. The sun forms a trine and the moon a square. Since Mars is the slower planet, we say that Mars collects the light from the other two and thereby connects them. Here's another horary question. Will I find my lost necklace? See figure 12, which is probably on the next page. In this chart, the ascendant is 11 degrees Virgo, ruler of the ascendant. 11 degrees Virgo. The significator of the querent is Mercury, which is the ruler of the ascendant, which is at 18 degrees of Scorpio. The lost object is represented by the ruler of the second house of possessions, which is 11 degrees Libra on the cusp. Venus, its ruler, is at 21 degrees Libra. There are no aspects between Mercury, the querent, and Venus, the querent, the quesited, i.e., the necklace, the thing in question, which indicates a negative response. Nevertheless, both planets are applying to Mars. They're saying Mars, but they're showing not Mars. We're talking about Venus and Jupiter. They are showing, Venus and, Mercury is the querent, because it's Vern, and then Venus represents the necklace, Mercury and Venus, and so we have Jupiter here at 25 Capricorn. So interesting that we'll have to figure this out, right? We're looking at Jupiter, but they're talking Mars. So let's see what they say about Mars. Nevertheless, both planets are applying to Mars, which is at 25 degrees Capricorn, Mercury by sextile, and Venus by square. Um, we can conclude that Mars gathers or collects the light from both planets. And I would say that they really meant to put Jupiter because I think Jupiter would be more beneficial to finding something. So we're going to say that Jupiter gathers or collects the light from both planets, acting as an intermediary who reunites the two. In this case, Jupiter might represent a friend that finds the lost object, Venus, and safeguards it until the owner, Mercury, can recover it. Okay, that's something that should be checked out. So I would say, I wonder if it was Mars, what it would mean. Like, it got cut up. It got smashed. You get it back, but it's smashed. But anyway, Jupiter in the sign. Okay. We'll move on to the next video. Thank you.